Everyone's been following Ivy Baldwin for the past 6 years.
That's true.
And you all know this. But anyhow, hopefully a couple more people will fill in today. And again, just a special official thank you. Kathy Grumpy on 20th Street, in between 7 and 8, literally like right through the building.
I've known Ivy for a long time, and I think she's one of the first. She was on a Fresh Tracks program at Dance Theater Workshop the first year that I worked here, so that was about 6 years ago. And I've really been following her work, like Megan said, ever since. And I think one of the reasons why I've always been really attracted to her work is just because I think she does a really amazing job of creating a very particular, sometimes kind of strange world. And I love that whenever I go through her work, I just always feel like I'm going to be entering into some place that's not necessarily a literal place, it's not necessarily something that's identifiable, and yet I always feel like it's very exact and it's very, it's just wholly created in terms of who the people are, their relationships with one another. And one of the things that I was talking with her about in terms of this piece, which is called Bear Crown, I was talking with her just sort of about how she works in terms of her process, and one of the first things that she mentioned was how actually, how important the residency that she did in Romania this past October was in the shaping of this piece. You know, some choreographers, when they begin work on a new project, a lot of them will sort of start with an idea that they, you know, have just been ruminating on for a little while, and when they go into the studio, that's really, it's that central idea that they've already thought about that they're going to try to build the work based from that. But Ivy said, you know, we were talking that really her process tends to be, you know, she doesn't have a preconceived idea necessarily of, you know, oh, I'm really thinking about this particular subject and that's going to be my starting point to work. That she's much more, she's really impacted by the environment that she's around when she's beginning to make a work. And so that's actually why she spent about a month in a really small, basically village or town in Romania. I can't remember the name of the town, but it's Bacau. Yeah, it is Bacau. And so for her to be in a completely different environment, to be in a completely different culture, even though she'd already had, you know, some movement phrases that she had been working on and had created before she went to the residency, it happened pretty early in her process. And so what ended up happening was that it really completely altered the direction, or really shaped the direction of the piece that we'll see tonight. And so to me that was really interesting because you know, what we are going to go see, it's not a piece that's about Romania in any kind of literal sense. It's not a piece that's, you know, about, that has any kind of narrative or a very literal explanation or representation of Romania. But it's completely based off of her experience while she was there and little things that happen. And one of the stories that she kind of shared with me, there's a section in there in the piece, and she said it was fine for me to do this way. So that has a Bonnie Tyler song from the 1980s, which many of you may know. It's called Total Eclipse of the Heart. It's a song that I know very well. But there was basically like one bar in the town. So after she would finish working, she and her company members would go, you know, to like the one bar to kind of unwind, and that's where pretty much everywhere in the town, everybody in the town went if they wanted to have a drink in a public place. And she just thought the difference was really funny because, you know, if you go to a bar in New York City, every little detail about the space has been thought through in terms of the lighting and the seats and the music, and it's all to create a kind of theme. But here, it's totally not that way at all. And in terms of the music, they had like one CD that they would just play constantly on loop. So within like a 2-hour period, you had heard all of the songs on the CD like 3 or 4 times. And nobody in the bar ever seemed to notice this except for her and her company members who thought it was kind of hysterical, especially because the mix of the music was just random stuff, and one of the songs included Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart. And so it was just something that was kind of this ever-present soundtrack in a way to the residency time that she was there. It's like 3 weeks of hearing the same CD over and over and over again on a loop. And so that's one of the things that actually when she got back to New York after the residency period and was sort of absorbing everything and digesting everything that they had worked on, that actually ended up finding its way into the piece, which I think is kind of interesting. A little funny story. So, but this is meant to be a conversation, not just me talking at you. So I wanted to just sort of ask who here has, if anybody's seen Ivy's work before, or if you're all sort of brand new to Ivy. You've seen Ivy. And you've seen Ivy. Okay, so most of you don't have a lot of background on her. Does anybody have a question in terms of anything about tonight's event?
Well, I'm curious to know why she went to Romania, how that came about, why Romania?
Sure.
It's sort of interesting and odd choice.
Well, I think some of it, it's a small community, and so a lot of artists find out about other opportunities from other artists that they know. And Yanira Castro, who is an artist that we've also worked with a lot, she was on our season last year. I'm not sure how Yanira found out about the program, but there's this artist residency program that's run by George Apostu, who's he's not an artist. From what I know of him, it's actually a little random that he decided to start this festival for contemporary dance in this tiny little village in the middle of Romania, but he did. And he invites artists from different countries there for like a working period, and then he has a festival later on of all of the artists who've come to his space in the last year. And Yanira Castro went there, I think, 2 years ago, which also the trust supported that trip. And Ivy heard about that and was looking for a residency period for her company outside of New York City, where I think most artists don't get that opportunity. And when they're making work, and she knew her timeline in terms of what her own process was and what her needs were, and she really felt like the best possible way for her to make this piece was for her to be able to secure some kind of residency outside of the city where they could go and be completely removed from all of the pressures and stresses and routines of life here, and only being able to squeeze in a rehearsal from 6 to 8 on Monday and from 7 to 9 on Wednesday, and maybe that's it for the week. So I think she heard about this from Yanira, and then she, since it was in Romania, she knew that she could apply to the Trust for Mutual Understanding to get support to go there, and she did. And so that's how she ended up there. So it is kind of random, but I think in the sense of artists that are working today really knowing that they need to find those kinds of residency periods that are few and far between in order to really be able to build their piece and have crucial research and development time. That she was sort of looking for any opportunity that she could find and trying to build a piece. But it is a little random, but kind of cool.
Was her sense or your sense that it was, she was influenced by the fact that it was Romania that she was in? I mean, in what ways did that culture then, from your own perspective?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think that, not in the sense, again, like what I said, that the piece is not about Romania per se, but that because her process is so built around the particular context and the environment that she's in when she's making a piece, that it was kind of inevitable that things that were maybe specific to that particular location and culture were going to find their ways into it. One example is actually that the title of the piece, Bear Crown, comes from the label of a local beer called Orsis, I think. Yeah, and on the label there's a bear with a crown, and that not again in any kind of literal way, but she sort of took that into the studio, and there's a whole section where you'll see how they end up using it. It's pretty funny, and she does use kind of almost an absurdist humor in a lot of her pieces, which is something that I really enjoy. You kind of never know what you're going to expect, but she was telling me that about this piece that they're not purposefully, but just sort of the way that it ended up going is that there is sort of a lot less overt use of humor. And this I kind of think is interesting. I asked her, sort of, like, well, what is this piece about for you? In terms of like how you're talking about it, and what she was saying is that basically the sort of central idea that emerged out of this piece is the idea of how you start with something really beautiful and structured, and the journey that sort of inevitably follows into inevitable deterioration. And so that's sort of what she was thinking about in the piece, and I don't think that in her thought process that she was thinking of Romania or the sort of breakdown of social structures in a post-Soviet place. But when she was talking about that to me, I found that really interesting, because I think that you can actually talk about Romania or some of the post-Soviet places and find that sort of something that was very structured and very orderly and very pristine on the outside, and then there was a total deterioration of that system and a total breakdown. And I mean, Romania, in terms of the revolution that they had, was a particularly violent breakdown and deterioration of that system. But I don't think that, when she was talking to me about how that idea emerged, I don't think it emerged in connection to, oh, I'm thinking about Romania and this is what I'm going to do with it. But it was interesting to me that that's what the piece ended up sort of exploring, and that so much of the work was really impacted by our residency in Romania. So. Other questions or thoughts? Anything you want to know?
Maybe because people aren't necessarily a chance to talk to Ivy, and I think that her sound score was so particularly took that same kind of, it had a real connection to, I think, the kind of emotive quality of the work in its own ways. Perhaps we could talk a little bit about how Justin and Ivy were told.
That I don't know.
Don't the speaker.
Okay. Yeah.
No, but I think.
Well, I guess the reason why I was asking is because I thought maybe you might know, but it just had to do with the fact that they've done almost all of it by email, which I think is like really interesting. And then he did come, I guess,
Just
2
last
weeks
week
or something like that to bring it together.
Yeah, her sound designer is actually based in Minneapolis now. He used to be based in New York, which is how they know each other, and he moved to Minneapolis probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't think she's worked with him before. I think this was the first time that she had worked with Justin on a sound score. And yeah, I mean, I think that it was all done because, she didn't have money to be flying out to Minneapolis. He didn't have money to be flying to New York to see rehearsals. And so the whole collaboration was done via long distance with, her sending stuff through email or them just talking, and her sending something, he would do a little something, send it back to her, she'd see how it worked, and then, things went back and forth like that. So from a very remote kind of location, which is interesting.
It is because it has such a feeling of being intimately connected. It is that you might think that they were actually in the same room, for a while.
Yeah. I don't think she heard the whole finished sound design until about a week and a half ago. And neither had the dancers. So
Very similar with the costumes too. They hadn't seen the full costumes until about a week and a half ago.
yeah.
It's designed by a fashion designer who doesn't sew, so they flew the designs to China. They were sewn in China and then flipped. Yeah, like all arriving at Dance University at the same time.
I think it's really interesting that sort of how that speaks to the independence and the connectivity of a process these days. That it's not just, the work was shaped and made in Romania, costumes made in China, sound was done in Minneapolis, and it all came together here. I know one thing that Ivy wanted me to sort of stress, because she feels like choreographer, and she is directing the piece and making the artistic decisions. That her process is really, really collaborative with the dancers. She's been working with most of the dancers in this company. She's been working with, well, there's a film back there from her last piece, talking about, I think it was last season. And so she's been working with this, the one in the red skirt, Mindy, and the man, Lawrence. She's been working with them for probably at least 5 or 6 years, a long time. And then Katie Workham in the middle was in this last piece, and she's also in this piece. And her dancers are a really big part of the process in terms of how the movement is actually generated, and just contributing to the overall piece. And so, you know, some artists work really collaboratively, and some don't. Some, you know, really, like, they work by themselves in the studio, they generate the material, and then when they have their rehearsal with the rest of their company, they sort of set the movements on the dancers, and they go from it at that, you know, in that way. But I think it's a much more sort of fluid process for her, and she really feels the importance of that collaboration for herself in terms of how she's able to think about the work and develop it.
Did Chloe round to
Yeah.
what? And when did that, I mean, I'm just thinking about, you know, when things from what you're describing started and ended, and when could she start then trying to get a concept of that?
Yeah, well, Chloe was local, so that made it easy.
Right.
I think Ivy approached Chloe probably over the summer to see if she would be available to do her lights. This is the first time that they've collaborated as well, which I know Ivy was really excited. And for those of you who don't know, Chloe Brown is also the director of production here at C&C Workshop, in addition to being a freelance lighting designer. And she's won Bessie's, and she's really, really pretty amazing lighting designer. We're lucky to have her here. So Ivy, yeah, but I don't think probably that Chloe started going to rehearsals or anything like that probably until January. I mean, I think that they were probably talking all along and checking in on each other, but I think probably in January is when Chloe started to actually attend rehearsals. And because also I think that, you know, Ivy had to get to a certain place in the creation of the piece where she also had enough to be able to show Chloe, or had enough of a sense of what it was, to be able to communicate some of those ideas to Chloe in terms of how it might be.
Is this work evolutionary from what she's done before, or more of a departure, or, you know, what's similar, what's different from her earlier?
I think that I haven't actually seen the full piece yet. I've seen parts of it. I think that it is. I think when I look at her work, that this will definitely fit in on a sort of continuum. But at the same time, I do feel like she took. What she said to me too was that she felt like her process was just able to be so much deeper, and with this piece, just in the way that she was actually able to create it with the residency, and for that reason, the piece feels a lot more grounded and rooted than her work has been in the past. And so, and I think again too, she said that, you know, not purposefully, but that there is a lot less overt humor. And I think in a way that this piece might be, I don't know if darker is quite the right word, but a little bit more intense.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a more mature word for her.
Not that any of our other pieces had it before, but they weren't based on any particular kind of build or disintegration, or they're all really based on character and environment and all the bits and pieces that means. And but this particular piece just has such a really crystally beautiful structure. I think that really highlights some of the skill, and also some of the reason maybe why the humor isn't as constant. Because it's really about that kind of, like Sarah said, that deterioration that happens from these beautifully grand, like architectures or societies or whatever it may be. Takes.
And I think reflects the fact that she was able to have this really defined working period at the beginning of her process. because I think that, you know, all of the artists that we work with, who end up being able to have residencies, you know, string along you know, all the artists that we commission end up getting a 1-week creative and technical residency in our theater the week prior. For most of them, it's the week prior, which is great. But I think it's also important that they can find those residency opportunities early on in the process. I think that you just can't help but see that reflected in the work, because they've just had an opportunity to work so much more intensively on the piece than, you know, like I was saying, squeezing in a rehearsal from 6 to 8 on a Monday and 7 to 9 on a Wednesday, and cobbling those little times together over even a year is not going to amount to the same kind of work that you can get when you have your whole team for a whole 4-month-long period in the same place where nobody has anything else to do but work on the piece. Yeah, whether they like it or not. So.
Did she talk about the set at all with you?
No, but
I mean, I don't know much about the process of building it. I think it was part of the vision of the piece for a while. When we had our high school program was called Culture Shifters, and a couple of high school students came in to watch a rehearsal of Ivy's before she left for Italy, so maybe 2 months ago or a month ago. And it was very clear that she was going to have this kind of, it's on the walk. I doubt she might tell you what it looks like. But it's like this like cake-like stair structure. Like you picture the Oscars when people come down in gowns. It's very beautiful and grand. I was wondering if you guys talked about it, because I'm curious. Wide stairs. And how they're.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I know that they refer to it as the wedding cake.
Any other questions?
well, this thing about the one CD just reminds me, it just goes to show what somebody with talent can do. We went on vacation someplace one year, and the place where we had lunch every day had only one CD, which was a Lou Rawls CD. And by the end of the week, we all just went, you know, like, never hear it again. And then my daughter gave it to me for Christmas because it drove me crazier than anybody else. But you know, somebody with talent makes a piece out of it. It just drove me crazy.
Lemonade, lemonade.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well, just so everybody knows, the next Coffee and Conversation is with Degi Sheni, who is an Israeli choreographer. And it's being led by Eva Yaasintwal. So it would be really great if you came back for that. Again, it'll be free coffee. And then if you're someone that just really loves talking about dance or any issues with the field, we have a Lobby Talk series. And the next Lobby Talks is actually on April 14th. I was like, is it? April 14th, which is about the relevance of the university model within the contemporary dance field, which I just think is a really fascinating discussion between working artists and the residency programs, and the universities are now presenting and commissioning work as well. So that discussion is going to happen on April 14th with a pretty amazing panel. So if you want any more information about that, please visit the website. But thank you for coming this evening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please check in with the box office, and the house will probably open around 7:20.
Sure.
You'll be surprised.